And welcome back to This Week. Time now to get the views of our media and political experts, MMA Creative Vice President, Democratic Operative Mike Kopp, and heard daily on 1510 WLAC syndicated talk show host, Steve Gill. Welcome, gentlemen. Hope you had good Thanksgiving as we tape this leading into the weekend. I guess the big issue going on this week, Israel, the unrest going on there, it's pretty dangerous. Obviously, the bombings continue, but as we tape, there is a ceasefire in place. It is about to take place anyway. The question is for how long and what's the next step to keep it that way?
How many ceasefires have we had in this region? I mean, they announce a ceasefire and then, you get the same thing happening. Thousands of missiles have been fired into Israel. Every time Israel gives up land, the demands for more land continue. So you're not going to trade land for peace. They've given up land and found themselves in the same situation. It's a difficult situation, and frankly, you've got to have a more, I think, expansive role in what happens there rather than just kind of leaving hands off, which is how it looks to me we've been doing in that region the last year or so.
Well, I think this is a real test for the new leadership in Egypt. I mean, Egypt's always been the great mediator between the two sides, and clearly they've stepped up again. At least they're showing that they're willing to step up again, and I think it's largely because they see the U.S. as a needed ally in that region. So I think a lot of it depends on how well that leadership, the new leadership in Egypt, can hold this together.
The president, again, offered his unwavering support. Secretary Clinton is there, but as we heard, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is pretty much saying, we're not taking anything. We're going in. They got troops ready to go. So it's a precarious ceasefire at the best.
Well, again, if the missiles keep firing into the civilian areas, and again, thousands of missiles have gone into Israel. I've used the example on our show. If we had Canada firing thousands of missiles into New York, how long would they still be Canada? If your next door neighbor was lobbing hand grenades into your backyard, killing your kids, injuring your kids, how long would it be till you went over next door and kicked their butt? And I think Israel has shown amazing restraint, the continuing onslaught that's been targeted against them.
Well, I think also Israel has technology on its side with the Iron Dome. An invasion isn't as needed as it might have been before that. So while there's been a lot of firing of missiles, Israel's been able to hold its own with the Iron Dome. Netanyahu is a hardliner. I mean, he's always going to have his finger on the trigger. The key is to keep that finger from pulling, because if it does, all hell breaks loose, basically.
What are you guys hearing? A lot of discussion nationally on the GOP post Mitt Romney losing. Some northern folks saying the Tea Party influence is dead up there. We see it's still pretty strong in the southern areas. A lot of Republicans talking about a need to change, to expand more. What are you hearing here locally? Is this discussion taking place in Tennessee?
I think this election was really a mixed bag and shows kind of the disconnect that people have with both political parties. You had President Barack Obama win by, I think, 300,000, 400,000 votes in 5 states, shifting the other way, in the right 5 swing states, and you have a different result. You've got blue states that turn more blue, red states that turn more red. Tennessee, Arkansas, North Carolina turned historically red in terms of the Republican-Democrat split. You had places where Republicans ran moderates, like Tommy Thompson in Wisconsin, where conservatives like Scott Walker have won. A moderate Republican loses. So I don't think you can look at what happened across the board and say, okay, this is the lesson from this election, and people are going to be looking at tea leaves for a long time. I don't think there's a clear answer.
Well, I do think that I agree with Steve on that. I don't think there's a clear silver bullet answer to what you do with the Republican Party or what the future is of the Democratic Party. But clearly the Latino vote has become more influential, and having people in the Republican Party take some of the extreme positions they took on immigration hurt them across the board, across the country. And we can already see Republicans like Lindsey Graham, Senator Lindsey Graham, trying to distance himself from Mitt Romney, their candidate, because of his position on immigration.
Lindsey Graham's always been for full-on amnesty, though, so it's not like Lindsey Graham has taken a different position. I think when I look at Lindsey Graham, he's got an election in a red state like South Carolina coming up in about 18 months, a primary. May very well have a primary because that is a very conservative state. His voting record has been to the left. Lindsey Graham is always a lot more conservative about a year and a half before election than he actually votes the rest of his Senate career.
Here in Tennessee, we're still debating the Scott DesJarlais issue in the 4th Congressional District. We asked the governor about it. Should he resign? The governor kind of tossed it back and said it's up to Scott DesJarlais to decide if he can effectively represent his constituents. This is not going away.
No, and I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I think Scott DesJarlais has basically 3 choices. He can resign, which I think is probably unlikely. He can announce that he won't seek re-election and hope that kind of tamps down the media interest. But when they start coming after a medical license, when more of the news and more of these women start speaking up, that story doesn't go away. Or he can just say, I'm going to run, but he's now toxic, and his ability to both influence things in Tennessee and in Washington has basically been lost.
And when the transcripts don't match what he says, that really is indicting.
It is indicting. The whole situation's indicting. But the fact of the matter is, Governor Haslam is the head of the Republican Party. I mean, he's the statewide leader of the Republican Party, and to get signals, at least public signals from Haslam, that it's kind of up to DesJarlais to make his decision, doesn't show any really strong leadership there. I hope that behind the scenes, Haslam's putting more influence on DesJarlais to make a decision.
That's my next question. Is there behind-the-scenes actions from the two Republican senators, maybe the other Republican congressmen, to at least have discussions with him that we don't maybe not know about, that maybe the best thing in the state interest of Tennessee is for him to step aside?
I think, unfortunately, he has given a black eye to the whole state of Tennessee, certainly to conservatives. I'm not hearing as much that behind the scenes members of Congress, the senator, the governor are doing anything. I do think some of the money people are saying, hey, my checkbook is closed permanently, as are my friends. I think that same kind of information is coming out of Washington. And as we all know, in politics, money doesn't talk, it screams. And if you don't have it, you're silenced.
Next, the other issue going on this week is the health exchanges for Obamacare. The governor has gotten an extension. They don't have to put them in place till December 14th. And the question still remains, will the state run these health insurance exchanges, or will the federal government run them? And we don't know the answer yet. You heard the governor talk about he wants more information from the Obama administration, so we're kind of in a holding pattern. No one wants to talk about this one.
No, actually, I think it's obviously in the state's best interest to have more of a handle on what goes on with an exchange and to simply just
let
pass the buck to
it.
And what Governor Bredesen demonstrated, and what Haslam has demonstrated since he's taken over state government, is that they can manage TennCare. TennCare has become somewhat of a model for state Medicaid programs around the country. So we're in better shape to have the state be doing it than just leave it to the federal government.
But it only became a model after you kicked hundreds of thousands of people off of it. Hundreds of thousands of people will be put back on it through this Obamacare system that will ultimately break the bank. We're being told it'll save us money. That's what they said about TennCare before it nearly broke the state. I think it is a horrible decision if the state embraces these exchanges, because it imposes a whole host of rules and regulations on Tennessee that we don't necessarily have to comply with if the federal government does it. And more importantly, it's going to be a disaster. Why would we want to embrace it and get the blame when it's really Obama's
Lieutenant
fault?
Governor Ron Ramsey kind of indicated he thought it would pass in the GOP-controlled legislature. That surprised me a little bit. We hear that the governor would probably like to have it state-run controlled, but we really don't know what's going to happen. And it's always dicey for, if you're a Republican, to be voting for something that is a Democratic president's package.
Particularly since they voted last year with the Healthcare Exchange Freedom Act in Tennessee overwhelmingly. I think it was about 70 votes in the House, Democrats and Republicans, overwhelming majority in the Senate, and the governor signing it. They're going to have to completely rescind what they did last year, which I think is bad politics. This has the potential to become like Don Sundquist trying to force an income tax down Tennesseans' throats, and I think it'll have the same impact.
10 seconds.
Well, the issue is, do we want state control or federal control? And it seems to me the Republicans would want state control because they preach that all the time.
Mike Kopp, Steve Gill, appreciate it. Thanks for a good Thanksgiving, too. Stay with us. This week continues in a moment.